Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to talk about an introduction to measurement. Introduction to measurement course. Introduction to measurement. And what measurement is, and what is it in the context of like geometry, and in the real world, right? In the context of what do we mean in the context of the real world, right? All right. So basically, when you measure something, right, you're trying to find out you're trying to find out an arbitrary unit of measure so that you're able to do something with it, right? So like, for example, if you say something like, I want to measure the table because I have to do it, I have to measure it in order for me to do something, for me to figure something out, right? That's an application of geometry, and that's an application of measurement, right? To understand measurement, we have to understand space, which is a geometric object, and we have to understand what is what is meant by a spatial dimension, which is a geometric concept, right? So basically, we have this thing called space, right? So space is like this three-dimensional like thing that we live in. It's like a three-dimensional like geometric object that we live in, right? We see it every day when we go outside, right? It's the stuff that's contained, like it's the so it's the things in which things are placed in, for lack of a better explanation, right? All right. Within this geometric space, right? So this, let's just say this is space. Let's just say this is space. This space, right? Let's just say this is we mentioned this as space, right? Right. And in this space is three-dimensional, right? And what we mean by a dimension is that is a what we mean by what dimension means in mathematics is that it means that it's a way that we can move within space, right? It's a way that we can move within space. It's a thing of movement, right? So when we think of space, another way of saying space is called a spatial dimension. It's called a spatial dimension, right? Now, in our universe, we have, or at least it's commonly, at least according to science, that is commonly we commonly perceive space in our everyday to day life as as three dimensions, right? So we understand space as length, width, length, length, width, and height. Length, width, and height, right? The length of something is telling us how long something is. It tells us how long something is. So, for example, like if I have my phone I want to know how long something is, I will use some type of measuring device to indicate how long something is, right? Right? If I want to know the width of something, I can also use a measuring device of some kind to figure out how wide something is, right? So, for example, if we use the table as an example, then we as a practical example of what we're talking about, we would say that the table is this part is the length because we're trying to figure out how long the table is, right? And if we took to this part, we're talking about the width because we're trying to figure out how wide the table is, right? So width is talking about how wide something is, right? And height is talking about how tall something is. So for example, if you go outside and you went and you wanted to figure out like, well, how tall is a tree? For example, you would use some type of device or something like that to figure out, well, how tall if we wanted to figure out how tall the tree is, or we wanted to figure out how tall is a door, we would use like a ruler or something like that to figure out how tall is the door, because we have to understand that for some practical like reason, right? So we have to figure out how tall. Height is talking about how tall something is, right? Height is talking about how tall something is. So in mathematics, we understand this as like something like this, right? This is height. This is width. And this is length, right? Something like that, some more or less, right? That's in this three-dimensional universe called space, right? In this three-dimensional thing called space, right? In this three-dimensional thing called space, right? Now, obviously, if we want to know how long something is, how wide something is, or how tall something is, we have to use something to try to figure this out, right? So we would use some type of measuring device in order for us to try to figure this out, right? So usually we would use something like a ruler, or if we're talking about something that's, that's small, right? So if you're talking about like, I want to figure out what is the length, what is the length of this crayon, right? So I would use like a ruler or something like that to figure that out, right? If I wanted to, or you could use a tape measure. If I wanted to figure out how tall is the door, right? If I want to figure out how tall, if I go to this door and I figure out how tall is the door, I would use like a tape measure, a yardstick, or something like that to figure out how tall the door is, because I can't use a ruler because a ruler is too small, right? I would have to use some type of longer device in order for me to do that, right? If I wanted to figure out how wide something is the same thing. Depending on what the object is, I might have to use a ruler, or I might have to use a, tape measure or something like that to figure that out, right? Now, we can't figure that out without understanding some more geometric ideas. So, for example, length. We can't understand length without understanding what distance is. So, what is a point? Well, a point is some location. A point is some location in space. A point is some point is some location in space. It's something. It's some place in space, right? So, for example, we have this point, and let's say we have this point, right? We can measure this because this is called a line segment, right? When two points meet, right? Like when we have 2 points and we have this distance here, this is called a line segment. We can measure a line segment because it has a beginning and an end, right? This point is the beginning, and this point is the end. So we can measure it because the distance is finite. The distance it has a beginning and an end, right? So it's something that's measurable. We can say, well, this is 5 inches, 5 centimeters, 5 whatever the arbitrary unit is, right? So we have point, which is the location in space. And we have line segment, which is a part of a line, right? We cannot measure a line itself because a line goes on forever. So we can't measure it. It's not measurable because theoretically a line goes on into infinity. So it's not something that we can measure, right? Right? So basically length and width and height in the real world is a line segment of some sort, because we have to have a beginning and an end in order for us to measure it, right? All right. Now, we go into the concept of measurement. Well, how do we actually measure things, right? So, in order for us to measure things, right, we use some type of arbitrary unit of measure. So we will say something like we will use inches, feet, yards, and miles, but that is called the American unit of measurement. The American unit of linear measurement. The American unit of measurement is how things are measured in the United States and in most of, like like England, right? So in American unit of linear measurement, we use something like, we use inches, feet, yards, and miles in order for us to understand, like, in order for us to have some type of like standard in which we're measuring things, and and like in math and in science and like things like that, right? So we say that, well, 12 inches equals 1 foot, which is the equivalent of most rulers in the United States, right? 12 inches equals to 1 foot, right? That's just an arbitrary measurement that scientists have used to measure things. Then we have, well, okay, so we have 3 feet equal to 1 yard, right? 3 feet equal to 1 yard, and we have 5,280 feet is equal to 1 mile. And since 3 feet, since we know this from proportion, we know that, well, if 5,280 feet is 1 mile and 3 feet is equal to 1 yard, then we can just do, okay, well, if 3 feet is equal to 1 yard, then how many feet? And 5,280 feet is how many yards, right? So we divide by 3. And this gives us 1,760. Yards in 1 mile, right? Okay, this is the American unit of linear measurement. Now, the American unit of linear measurement is not used around the world, and I can tell you different personal experience traveling. The American unit of linear measurement is used in the United States and in Europe, but in order for us to understand how it's used globally, we have to understand the metric system also. Okay, the metric system of linear measurement. The metric system of linear measurement is used throughout the world. It's not just used in the United States. Every other place other than the United States and Europe, to some degree, uses the metric system. So it's important for you to be able to understand it, so that if you travel and you travel beyond the scope of the United States, that you're able to convert between American and metric, right? So the base unit. So whereas in the American unit of linear measurement, the base unit is the inch. The inch is the base unit, right? And in the metric unit of linear measurement, the base unit is the meter. The base unit is meter. The base unit is meter. So 1 is 1 meter. And in the metric unit, the metric system, we go by tens, because the metric system in general is just based off of base 10. So we do meter, right? Then we do centimeter, which is 1/100th of a meter. We do millimeter, which is 1/1000th of a meter. We do decimeter, which is 1/10th of a meter. We do decameter, which is 10 meters. We do what's 100? We do kilometer, which is 1,000 meters, and we do hectometer, which is 100 meters. Okay, so that's the base idea of linear measurement, right? So we have to understand that the American unit of linear measurement is dealing with inch, the base unit is inch, and the metric system is dealing with, the base unit is meter, and we have to know how to convert, and it's dealing with base units of 10. Right? So that's it for today. There's a lot of information that is for today. And in the next lesson, we're gonna learn how to how do we actually use the American unit of linear measurement in order for us to measure things, and how to use the metric system of linear measurement, and how to convert between the two, because it really is important for us to be able to do that. Because if you go to any other country other than the United States, they don't use the American unit. I can tell you from my experiences in China or my experiences traveling that it's not, especially if you go to Asia, that they don't use it. So it's important for us to be able to know the difference, so that when we are in a situation where we have to use this information, we know how to use it. Okay? That's it for today. Thank you, and have a nice day.